So, despite it being WrestleMania week, we do have some interesting information when it comes to AEW World Champion Kenny Omega and his future with Impact Wrestling after Rebellion. Of course, coming up at Impact Wrestling Rebellion later this month, you have Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann, AEW World Champion versus Impact World Champion, title for title. One person is going to be leaving Impact Rebellion as both the AEW World Champion and the Impact Wrestling World Champion. So, it's a really big event on the horizon. I know WrestleMania week's going to be dominating and I know everyone's going to be talking about WWE, but even so, we'll try and get some Impact Wrestling videos out this week, especially because, of course, Impact do have a big event this week coming as well. They have Hardcore Justice, which features some big matches, and, of course, on Thursday nights as well, you have Impact Wrestling returning to Thursday nights as well. So there is a lot going on at the moment in the world of Impact Wrestling, so we're going to be doing our very best. I'm going to be doing my very best to try and cover as much as I can, so please do bear with me. But we do have some interesting information regarding Impact Wrestling's plans for Kenny Omega going forward. Now, of course, as I mentioned, Kenny Omega is set to take on Rich Swann in the title for title match at Impact Wrestling Rebellion pay-per-view, which is on April 25th, Sunday, April 25th, to avoid the competition from the UFC. The match, of course, has a lot of attention because it could see the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega leave the Impact Wrestling pay-per-view as their world champion. Now, during the Wrestling Observer radio show, a recent edition of it, Dave Meltzer spoke about this situation. He said that Omega's time in Impact Wrestling won't be a, quote, one-and-done situation. This likely means there is more in store for Kenny Omega in Impact Wrestling as the two companies continue their partnership together. This is what Meltzer had to say, quote, there is another big Impact Wrestling Kenny Omega match coming other than with Rich Swann. I mean, there has to be another one because it's not a one and done for Kenny Omega in Impact. Omega is probably going to be working for other groups this year anyway. Now, it wasn't noted that Omega will be working with other groups such as the NWA, but that's also possible. NWA has been allowing AEW to use Thunder Rosa consistently, and of course, Serena Deeb is the NWA Women's World Champion whilst under an AEW contract. So, to be honest, I know that bit at the end there is a bit interesting. I don't necessarily think I see Kenny Omega becoming the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion or anything like that, but I think it's important to state that basically what I've been saying for the last few weeks when we've talked about Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling and Kenny Omega's relationship with AEW and Impact Wrestling, AEW's relationship with Impact as well, that to me this is just the beginning. I think I've been saying since the start of this year that one of my predictions was that Kenny Omega was going to challenge for the Impact World Championship. Tick, that's happening. My other prediction was that Kenny Omega was going to become the Impact World Champion, and obviously we can't tick that yet, but I think that's happening. And this latest report by Meltzer would kind of confirm that. Now, obviously, I can hear what you're all saying because in Meltzer's quote there, he hardly confirms anything. And this is sometimes part of the problem with Dave Meltzer when you listen to some of these Wrestling Observer radio shows or you listen to whatever in the newsletter, is that people can often confuse his opinion for facts, or they confuse his opinion with plans or reports. He says that Kenny Omega is not going to be a one and done situation, and his rationale for that is, well, it can't be, right? So he's not spoken to anyone. I think that's important to state. That's very important to state. I think he's come up to the same conclusion that I have. He's used some logic there that why would Kenny Omega lose to Rich Swann? No disrespect to Rich Swann at all, but it just doesn't make any sense. And don't get me wrong, sometimes in the world of pro wrestling stuff doesn't make sense. It doesn't rule out Rich Swann winning, but he's not. He's not. You can also tell that by the way that on episodes of AEW Dynamite, they haven't even referenced it, or they've barely spoken about it. If Rich Swann legitimately had a real opportunity or a real chance, or there was a possibility in that AEW and Impact were considering Rich Swann to win that match, they would have Rich Swann on episodes of Dynamite. They would say, possibly, because think of the logic there. Possibly, Rich Swann in the near future could be the new AEW World Champion. It would look a bit bad if AEW didn't promote that or didn't even promote the match, and then suddenly one week Rich Swann shows up on AEW Dynamite being like, oh, by the way, I'm your new World Champion. That match you didn't hype up, I won it. So that kind of logic just states that Kenny Omega's going to win at Rebellion. And again, I know people have said that, oh, it's going to be a no contest, it's going to be a double disqualification, it's going to be a count out. Again, I don't see that. I really don't see that. And Scott D'Amore, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President, he said that himself during the press release when they announced it was moving from Saturday to Sunday. He said, we can guarantee there will be one person leaving the Impact Zone, there will be one person leaving Impact Rebellion as both the AEW World Champion and the Impact World Champion. Because if they don't, if they give a screwy finish, this isn't WWE. And I don't mean that as a knock to WWE. I mean that as WWE can have done that in the past, and the reason they have done that in the past because they can get away with it. Now, they've done it time and time again over the course of several years, and it has turned certain fans away, and it has really left a bad taste in the mouth of certain fans, but ultimately, they're the big player. They have the monopoly. They're the number one company in the world when it comes to pro wrestling. They will have fans watching the shows, or tweeting about them, or posting on social media, or visiting their website, or watching their YouTube videos. Irrespective of what they do, they will have fans and they will make money. This isn't like Impact Wrestling, because if Impact Wrestling did a finish like that, if Impact Wrestling promised the world and did not deliver it, or they promised a certain outcome and they didn't deliver it, fans just wouldn't watch Impact again. And they don't have enough viewers or enough fans for them to take that risk, especially when they're moving to a different night. They just can't afford that. They can't afford to lose 60, 50, 40,000 fans because they feel like they were robbed of a proper finish or a proper ending of a pay-per-view. They can't afford to do that, because that would be like a quarter of their viewership base. So it doesn't make any sense for them for them to do that. So that's why I don't see it. It would just be too big of a risk for them to do anything like that. So look at the logic here. Is Rich Swann going to become the AEW World Champion? The answer is no. He's just not. Are they going to do a screwy finish? The answer is no. They can't afford to do that. The only outcome is Kenny Omega becoming the Impact World Champion. And if he becomes the Impact World Champion, what does that mean? Well, that means he's got to at least have one more match to lose the title, right? So possibly more than that. And this is what I've been saying for a long time. Even when Kenny Omega made his Impact Wrestling television debut, all the way back in December, just after he became the AEW World Champion, in that promo, one of the first things he said, this big spiel, this big monologue, this big soliloquy that he was going on at the time, he said, I used to collect comic books, I couldn't collect all the comic books in the world, so I've moved on, now I collect title bouts. And that's what he's doing. As soon as he said that, I went, well, he's definitely at least challenging for the Impact World title. He's probably going to win it because he's Kenny Omega. He's one of the biggest wrestlers in the world, one of the best wrestlers in the world. Of course he's going to challenge for it. He's probably going to win it if he challenges for it. And this whole bout collector thing has been brought back up now. You noticed it on Dynamite last week. What happened on Dynamite last week when Kenny Omega made his entrance? Don Callis was there, and what was he carrying? He was carrying the AEW World Championship, and he was carrying the AAA Mega Championship, because they're trying to plant that seed in your mind as a viewer. Wait a minute, Kenny Omega's collecting all of these championships. The image that they want at the end of Rebellion, this is what is all building up to, is Kenny Omega holding 4 championships. He's going to be holding the AEW World Championship, the AAA Mega Championship, the Impact World Championship, and the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, because the last 2 have been unified now. That's the image. That's the shot they're looking for. And if that is the case, which I think it will be, I think it's inevitable that it will be, he's going to have to at least have one more match, because he's going to have to drop the championship. And I spoke about this before, that I think that this victory for Kenny Omega leads to a bigger match. Rebellion's a massive event for Impact. It is, and they're going to be hoping and praying and fingers crossed for some really big business for Impact on an Impact scale, and obviously WWE business, but they're going to be looking for some big business. They're going to be looking at hopefully trending worldwide, and certainly in the United States, going to be looking at hopefully some large amount of buys on Fight TV and pay-per-view, and certainly some strong ratings as they move to Thursday nights. They're going to be hoping for all of that. But they're also going to be hoping that Rebellion is one event, but it's not a massively established Impact Wrestling pay-per-view. The 2 big established Impact Wrestling pay-per-views are Slammiversary and Bound for Glory. Now, Bound for Glory is in October. Can you really continue the momentum of Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling until October for Bound for Glory? I think you can. I don't think long-form storytelling is dead. I think just some companies find it very, very difficult, and certain fans, in fairness, necessarily don't have the attention for it, but I think it's almost insulting to say that fans don't, because I think they do. I really do think they do, but sometimes that's just what it is. So the most logical step would be that if Kenny Omega wins at Rebellion, which I think he will, then he defends it in the main event of Slammiversary. And that's a big pillar pay-per-view. That's a big pillar event for Impact Wrestling. And probably, maybe. I think it depends on if he's the AEW World Champion at the time, but probably he could drop the Impact World Championship there. Again, I think it depends on, is Kenny Omega the AEW World Champion? Because as long as he's the AEW World Champion, I just can't see him losing to someone on the Impact roster. And that's no disrespect to an Impact Wrestling talent. It really isn't. But my point there is that AEW are loaning their World Champion to Impact Wrestling. And Impact Wrestling are incredibly grateful for that. They wouldn't get Kenny Omega in Impact Wrestling any other way. I know there was stuff in 2018 where he was close, especially because of his relationship with Don Callis. I know that plays into it, but whilst he's AEW World Champion, AEW aren't going to allow their World Champion to lose to someone on the Impact roster. That's not to say that the Impact Wrestling roster is terrible, or it's smaller, or it's beneath AEW, but it's just smart business. You book your champion strong. In the same way that they wouldn't have Kenny Omega lose clean on AEW television to a random person, they won't have that in Impact Wrestling. They just won't, because it's smart business. So it depends how long Kenny Omega is the AEW World Champion for. If Kenny Omega drops the AEW World Championship, say, a Double or Nothing, if he drops it at Double or Nothing in May, that opens up the opportunity for him to have the match in July at Slammiversary. Anyone can pin him or defeat him, and then in reality, they haven't pinned the AEW World Champion because he doesn't hold the title anymore. Then AEW have protected their talent that way. That is a scenario. Obviously, another scenario could be, and this is possible, could be that at Slammiversary we have some form of a multi-man match, whether it's a triple threat match, fatal four-way, or something like that. You could possibly skirt around it if Kenny Omega doesn't drop the AEW World Championship at Double or Nothing in May. You could see a scenario whereby Kenny Omega is defending the Impact World Championship at Slammiversary in July. He's not involved in the decision. He doesn't get pinned. Whoever it is in the match, whether it's Rich Swann or maybe an Ace Austin or a Chris Bay, well, I think they're absolutely names I would be considering to be the next Impact World Champion. Maybe they get the victory by pinning one of the other names in the match that isn't Kenny Omega, because it protects all parties. That's a possibility as well. And then also, of course, because then you can build to, I mentioned about long-form storytelling, you can then build to Bound for Glory in October, because you can say, well, actually, Kenny Omega wasn't defeated. You can do the eventual Kenny Omega versus Ace Austin, Chris Bay, Rich Swann match. I don't know if you would want to do Rich Swann again if you've done it at Rebellion. So maybe Kenny Omega versus Ace Austin or Chris Bay, because I think that's the perfect opportunity to elevate a name that's under contract for a while as a young talent and make them into a main event star. I think that's the way to do it. You could then possibly build to Bound for Glory in October because you've stretched it out, and you can do long-form storytelling there because the fans won't get tired, because they will say, well, actually, we never saw them face off one-on-one, and in reality, Kenny Omega never got pinned. There's an issue. You build an issue. That's how you logically stretch things out, and that's how you logically tell stories in this scenario. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think when it comes back to Dave Meltzer's original comments on the Wrestling Observer radio show, that he's just basically said just that. He's looked at the logic. And there is, if you look at it in logic, it makes a ton of sense that not only will Kenny Omega become the Impact World Champion, but that will also inevitably mean that he has a couple more matches because he's got to defend it and he's got to lose it. So we're going to see way more of Kenny Omega on Impact Wrestling in the future, and I think that's a good thing. Now, I know the ratings have been a little bit like this recently. I think that has to do with it being WrestleMania week. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they move to Thursdays, considering, of course, with all of the strong competition going on at the moment, I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. The time that I would really start paying real close attention to it, of course, will be in these build-up shows the week before Rebellion or the episode before Rebellion, coming out of Rebellion, depending on what happens. That's the time to really be paying close attention to it. It certainly is going to be interesting, and it's a really interesting and exciting time to be a fan of both Impact Wrestling and AEW, and of course we will have it all covered here. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Kenny Omega's future with Impact Wrestling? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.